Well, I decided to just turn around and go back to Florida and give up on my trip. I missed the beach too much. Not. I'm in Manhattan Beach, California. Looks a little bit different than Miami, huh? And you know, my favorite thing about being here so far, and the thing that brought me here, guys, is this weather. It is like 75 degrees and sunny. As you can see, not a cloud in the sky. In Miami right now, probably feels like over 100 degrees with that sweltering humidity, and I don't miss it a single bit. This has been absolute paradise for me. I just love the weather here, especially in the summertime. It's just my favorite. So very happy to be out of the whole Arizona desert and the Palm Springs desert and all of that nonsense, and finally here, coast to coast. How about that? Now, ironically enough, even though we are in California, we're going to cover some Florida stories today, because yet another insurance company decided to leave Florida, guys, and this has been a massive problem for us Floridians, because who is going to be left to write insurance policies after you just keep seeing company after company leave? And the most recent one to leave is Farmers Insurance. And surprise, surprise, Farmers is the same insurance company that pulled out of California just a couple months ago. Or maybe it was just a month ago. It wasn't even that long ago. And now they're saying they're done with Florida. So they're pretty much eliminating all their risk in the highest risk states, according to them, and just collecting everybody's money and hoping to not pay any claims, which is basically the formula for running an insurance company. And this is a big deal because Farmers is dropping all of its homeowners insurance policies, its auto insurance policies, and its umbrella insurance policies across the entire state of Florida, which is going to affect tens of thousands of people. So think about all these people that are getting dropped from Farmers right now. What are they going to have to do now? Now they need to find a new insurance company, right? Somebody that will take on their risk, and at what price is it going to be, right? Because every single time, what we've been seeing is when people get dropped from their insurance, especially if there's a lapse for whatever reason, then their insurance skyrockets so high to the point where it can become unaffordable. And the companies that are left right now that are willing to write policies are just charging people an insane amount of money, guys. Like, you can get insurance in Florida, but you're going to pay probably more than your mortgage, your taxes combined. That's kind of how it's going right now. Insurance is becoming the #1 expense of owning any type of real estate in the entire state of Florida right now. And of course, they're blaming hurricanes, that's the #1 reason that Farmers decided to leave. But the reality is, and something that we know for a fact, is the main reason why insurance has become so expensive in Florida in particular is because of the massive amount of fraud. And I actually covered this in a video a few months ago. When you break down the expenses that insurance companies have had over the past several years and why so many of them are pulling out, I think it was something in the neighborhood of 80% of the money that they have lost during this time frame is not because of these catastrophic storms and damages, it's because of fraud, because of lawsuits, because of the roofing scams, all these things that have been happening. And guess what? Everyone's paying for it now, literally. And the quote from Farmers Insurance is saying, "This business decision was necessary to effectively manage risk exposure." In other words, we don't want to pay claims. We just want to collect premiums. And the funny thing is, they're saying, well, this doesn't affect our subsidiary companies, at least not for now, right? But I'm sure it will in the near future. I'll bet by the time the year's over, or by next year, all Farmers subsidiary companies probably won't be writing policies in Florida either. And I didn't even know they had subsidiary companies, but the ones they have are called Bristol West and Foremost. So if you have either one of those insurance companies, be warned, you could be next on the chopping block. They're saying you're good for now, but it's not going to be like that forever. And if you're wondering just how many people are actually going to be affected by this and losing an auto insurance policy or an umbrella policy or a homeowner's insurance policy, it's estimated that this is going to affect 100,000 Florida residents, which is unbelievable when you look at it from that point of view. And here's the interesting thing about this story is that under Florida state law, insurance companies are required to give 120 days notice to customers before their policies are dropped. And customers who receive a notice are encouraged to contact their agent immediately to find alternative coverage. The reason why I think this is a big deal is because earlier this year, the state legislature in Florida passed legislation to encourage more insurance companies to come back to the state, limiting the liability and the lawsuits that can be brought against these insurance companies in hopes that it might draw more of them back to the state. But yet, so far, we haven't really seen that. So far, what we're actually seeing is more people just getting dropped and more companies starting to leave the state. That's what we're really seeing happening right now. And the interesting thing is, farmers didn't mention lawsuits as one of the reasons why they're deciding to bail on Florida. They're just citing the catastrophic risk and replacement costs due to hurricanes. Why wouldn't they mention fraud? Because we know for a fact that fraud is actually the #1 reason why these insurance companies are going insolvent and why they're losing so much money. So either they don't want to admit that, or they'd rather just blame it on something like the hurricanes, because it's easier to do that and just say, this is the reason why we're leaving. Here's the truth also. Even though Farmers is claiming the hurricanes is the #1 reason, when they do financial autopsies on insurance companies that end up leaving the state of Florida, what they actually find is the main reason why these companies go insolvent is excessive payouts, high salaries, and fees to affiliated companies as the main problem that leads to bankruptcy, okay, among fraud. So all of those things are actually the real problem of why these insurance companies are going under. And that's why I think it's probably just going to be a matter of time, like before they're all gone. And the ones that are willing to stay are charging such an exorbitant amount of money that I don't know who's going to be able to afford it, guys. I really don't. And I guess the big disappointment from this as a Florida resident is so far the legislation that's supposed to draw more insurance companies back to Florida and start making insurance cheap again hasn't worked, okay? But maybe it will take some more time. It's only been a few months, that's the reality. So maybe these things take a little bit longer to play out. Maybe more companies want to see how this hurricane season's going to go and make their decision from there if they're actually going to bring it back and start writing policies again. I don't know. And this is a big problem because the average homeowner in Miami-Dade County has seen an increase of 5% just between November and March. And the average homeowner's insurance policy in Miami right now is about $5,600 a year, which I think is very low actually compared to what it really is. When you look at all these houses you guys see on my walks and everything, these guys are paying way more than that. That's just the average, you know, combining the high premiums with all the lower premiums. And still, $5,600 for the year for insurance is a lot of money. It's over $500 a month, guys. And Miami is not even getting the worst of it. It turns out that Pinellas County and Hillsborough counties in Florida are rising the most at 9.5% right now, but their premiums are still lower than in Miami. For example, in Hillsborough, average premiums $27.50 a year and $32.10 in Pinellas. So it's still cheaper monetarily speaking, but the premiums are rising by a much higher percentage on a year-over-year basis right now. And this is becoming such a problem that literally the average premium for the average Floridian right now has risen 42% in just the last year. So think about that, a 42% increase in 1 year. What's it going to be next year? How much are you going to have to pay in a year from now or the year after that if this legislation doesn't work, if more companies don't start coming back to the state? That's what people need to be looking at right now if you're considering buying an investment property or just a primary residence, a second home, anything in Florida right now, because can you get insurance? Can you afford the insurance, guys? You need to figure this stuff out before you pull the trigger, because you might be shocked by the amount that it could actually cost for an insurance company to cover your property right now. Now, they talked to one insurance agent in Florida that also says that You know, the hurricanes over the past few years are one of the major reasons why these companies are leaving. Once again, not mentioning the fraud. And that Hurricane Ian was the state's most expensive hurricane ever, costing about $109 billion in damages. But the reality is, you know, every hurricane is probably going to be the most expensive one in history when you factor in inflation and the replacement costs continuing to go up year after year. But he thinks that if we can go a few more years without getting a landfall from a major hurricane, then people's premiums might start going down again. But right now, they're stating that the risk is just too high and it's not going to happen. Ooh, that cold water felt so good on my feet. See, I love the cold water, guys. People complain that the water here is too cold. When it's sunny like this and warm, it feels great to me to get in this cold water. I love it. Absolutely love it. Now, speaking of inflation and high replacement costs as being a big contributor to high insurance, check this out. Florida recently got named as the nation's hotspot for inflation right now as well. So maybe that's the reason why I have a skewed opinion on the economy and how things are going and how expensive everything is, because I'm a Florida resident. I live there all year. I'm just here in California on vacation right now. But I've been experiencing basically record increases of the cost of living over there over the past few years, which has just been absurd, guys. And you know, to put into perspective, just real quick before we get into this story, Miami Beach, where I live, for example, used to be a pretty affordable beach town for what it was, okay? When I moved there in 2008, you could rent a one-bedroom on the ocean for $1,000 a month, okay? That is a dream right now. No one's ever gonna be able to get anything like that ever again. Nowadays, if you wanna rent a one-bedroom on the beach over there, forget it. You're probably looking at least $2,000 a month, if not more. Could be well over $2,500 a month, depending on the building, the location, walking distance to things. And you know, people complain all the time about how expensive it is here in California, right? Well, guess what? Coming from Miami, actually, the cost of living here seems pretty equal. I've only been in California for 2 days now, you know, yesterday in Palm Springs and then here in Manhattan Beach. But you know, I just went and did a bunch of grocery shopping since they're gonna be here for a while. And the cost of food was pretty much the same that we pay in Miami, nothing different. The gas is more expensive here, that's no doubt about it. All things being equal, the cost of housing is roughly the same now, you know? Now, don't get me wrong, if you want to buy an actual single family home here in Manhattan Beach, it's going to cost a lot more than it would in Miami. You can still buy a nice house in Miami for $1.5 million, which is about $1 million less than what it would cost here. But the rents here are actually far cheaper than the cost to buy, and in Miami, it's kind of running close to even right now. Now, they're naming the #1 reason why Florida is experiencing such high inflation right now is because of all the people who are moving into the state with high incomes. This is everybody. This is people relocating. This is remote workers. This is people coming from California, places like this. Imagine you sell your house in Manhattan Beach for $2.5 million. Well, you can buy pretty much anything you want in Miami for that price. Most of the houses we come across on our walks, you know, you can get something for under that price most of the time. So, not a bad deal. And still have money left over in your pocket. And think about this. The more people that move into the area, the more demand it places on everything. The more demand for housing, the higher demand for utilities and electrical usage, water usage, higher demand for food, higher demand for transportation, higher demand for buying new cars, you name it. Anything that people want or buy, there's more demand now and the same amount of supply, unless supply can rise to meet the demand, right? So therefore, makes prices more expensive, and it's why we're seeing such high inflation in the state of Florida. And surprise, surprise, this story even highlights the fact that Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, which is basically what we call South Florida, this is one of the worst examples of inflation, because the inflation numbers in May came out saying it was 4% nationwide, and I just saw the recent one saying now it's 3% in June. I don't believe that at all, but this is probably why. Because in South Florida, inflation is running around 9%. So turns out inflation is local, just like your housing market is. It's not my imagination that everything is going through the roof in costs right now. It's literally 9% more expensive this year for everything in Miami than it was a year ago. Especially restaurants, guys, and like going in groceries and all these things have gone up so much. Like, I could probably afford to move to California and pay pretty much the same. And I was thinking about this before, like, could I do something like that and would it be worth it? And you know, because you got to factor in, you come here, you have state income tax. It's something we don't have in Florida, but the property taxes in Florida are so high and the insurance is so high that that could be something that you might actually be able to save on here and could make up the difference for paying state income tax. So I don't know. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I'm just saying that it would be interesting to be able to run a calculation like that and see if you actually do save money living in Florida. Now, I think if you're some really rich person and you're making a few $1,000,000 a year or more, then definitely you can save money living in Florida because of the amount that the state of California will tax you on your income. But if you're not an extremely high earner like that, the difference might not be as stark. And then you have areas like Tampa and St. Petersburg, Clearwater. Inflation in these areas running at 7.3% right now. You have people that have been living in Florida for their entire lives or for a very long time no longer being able to afford it because the prices are just gone insane. You guys have seen it in my videos, and it's funny because when I do the next video walking through the neighborhood here, the prices aren't even going to be that different than what we see in Miami. Plus, you combine that with all of the foreign investment we have in Florida, it's a staggering amount of foreign investment that we have, of people all over the world that come in and buy real estate. I don't know much about this Manhattan beach market and how many foreign investors they have here, but I'd be willing to bet they probably do have a fair share of them too, because it is so expensive here. But at least in California, they have a lot of the high-paying jobs that people can get to actually be able to afford a lot of this real estate, whereas in Miami, we really don't. I mean, it's getting better. We do have a lot of companies moving over there and, you know, paying big salaries and affording people to be able to buy these expensive houses, but I don't think it's quite on the level that it is here just yet. And here's the crazy thing. I think these inflation numbers for South Florida in general are still off. And the main reason why is because we had this housing surge in the last few months, like we do every year. Since the housing market is seasonal, you see home prices go up, okay, during this time of year and kind of peak right around now. And that's one of the main drivers of inflation nationwide, but also locally. So if they're measuring inflation at 9% in Miami a few months ago, I can only imagine it's in the double-digit territory right now. And one last interesting point about this inflation data is, since Florida is such an inflation hotspot and inflation seems to be local, we can look at one of the places in the country where inflation is running even lower than the national average right now, which is Minneapolis, okay? Back in June of 2022, Minneapolis had an 8.7% inflation rate. Fast forward to today, it's only 1.8%. So I guess I could see how someone in Minneapolis watching one of my videos might think I'm a little crazy talking about how expensive everything is and all of this, because they're literally not feeling the same cost of living increases that someone like me is feeling living in South Florida. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You're gonna see a ton of videos from me around this area, Manhattan Beach. I might venture a little bit away from here from time to time as well, but I came here to stay by the beach just like I do at home and enjoy this cool weather. So most of the time, I'm probably gonna be shooting in the neighborhoods nearby here. And there's so many beautiful things, there's so many beautiful houses and beautiful landscaping to see. And I'm excited to share that with you guys on these walks. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next video on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.